Okay, welcome once again to Lecture 4 of this course. This course is called The Means and the Way and the Need to Communicate. If you know communication, what is it? We all use it, animals use it, everything on this planet uses it. So let's dive in. At the time of me speaking, a highly engineered piece of carbon and steel is hurtling towards the outer edges of our solar system, heading for eternity. Fastened onto the framework of the actual Pioneer space probe that mapped the outer planets, there's a bronze disc, a few inches in diameter. Etched onto these discs is a picture of a man and a woman, where our planet is, lying in relation to the Sun, an exploding atom which represents our technological boundaries so far achieved, and buried a bit deeper in this disk is a soundtrack of the sounds that represent this planet. Talking, music, birdsong are represented as being the most prevalent in our lives. The place is there just in case some alien race intercepts this probe. TV and radio travel so far, and they travel up to 50 light years into space, the signals from our televisions and our radios. And that is there just in case someone actually comes across this probe that we have sent out into space. Now if you think about it, space is pretty much of a quiet place. It's quiet, it's peaceful, because you know sound requires air to move, and in a vacuum is unable to actually do so. That is why the most violent explosions and the cataclysms in nature, like the supernova, etc., which is actually an exploding star, is silent. Now imagine, if you will, travelling through interstellar space with sound receiving equipment. It is definitely quiet, with not a sound being manifest. As you get closer to the little blue dot, certain whispering sounds start to be noticed. As you get closer, the whispering changes to a murmur, then a staccato jumble of strange sounds. Voices jabber and shout, music blasts and overwhelms, roars, screams, shouts, traffic fill the sky until it becomes unbearable in its volume. You fly past this horribly noisy planet, and with a sigh of relief, it fades back into the distance again. Indeed, we are a noisy little world as we seek to communicate with each other. Oral communication is one of the most important factors in our success in relationships with each other. As done before, I will first delve into the natural world before bringing ourselves to relevance to this. Ocean, land and air are the three mediums of the incredible rich world of communication. As anyone who's been in Africa or any tropical jungle will tell you, it is a busy place. Hoots, whistles, roars, chirps, catcalls fill the space, sounding like a discordant jumble in an out-of-tune orchestra. Yet every single utterance and stretch of the vocal cord is as important to the bearer as the emotions singed, appeal from pulpits or blast from advertising. Indeed, our humble frog has got 3 different call types. And we see our frogs every day in the garden and out in the wild, etc. Now he's got 4 different calls. One's advertising. I am gorgeous, come here lady, I am your man. Aggressive. Oi, you come here and try if you're hard enough. Release. Okay, you can go now, why don't you go away? Or distress. Help, don't come here. I have observed satellite kidnapping where a silent frog positions himself next to a calling frog, or calling male, rival male. And like a green SAS operative, kidnaps the female, attracted to the call of a dummy who never noticed that he was there in the first place. I've also seen timeshare calling, where males share time for calling, avoiding overlapping and acting as a location guide. Kermit is a bit more advanced than we realise. Coming down again, the African lion has a very complicated communication system. It has over 17 visual patterns, that is colouring, expression, facial expressions, etc. It has over 13 calls, roars, snarls, grunts, etc. It has over 5 olfactory signals, smells, scents, and 17 contact patterns, which is your body language. I mean, all this in just 2 totally different species that are worlds apart in size, habitat species, family genera, and taxonomy, yet so alike in goals, wants, desires, and using the same medium to achieve them. Now, monkeys and baboons, also a very interesting subject, have over 37 different types of calls as to most monkeys around the world. I mean, working as a safari guide, I was able to distinguish the different types of alarm calls from both baboons and vervet monkeys. One call for leopard or lion, one for snakes, and one for birds of prey. Being able to recognize the predator call, I knew there was a leopard or lion in the area, and it was just a case of following the chattering alarm that produced a patrolling lion or a disinterested leopard. A lot is being studied about the communication of baboons and primates, and yet we have barely begun to scratch the surface of this incredibly rich world. I mean, I have heard a male lion roar at full volume within a few meters of my Land Rover. Special bones in the larynx vibrate the specially lengthened vocal cords to produce a blast of sound that actually vibrates the air, as well as the leaves on the bush, echoing off into the African night to be audible over 7 miles away. Once, when I was walking in the bush on my own, because I often used to do that on my days off, I used to just find a game trail, walk it, and see where it went. I was conscious of a strange turnover in my stomach, almost as if a bass guitar string had been struck deep inside me. A herd of elephant a short distance away was communicating to another herd miles away using infrasound, a frequency too low for us to hear, passing through the bush, then through me, before continuing over miles and miles of Africa, before being picked up and acted upon by the receiving herd. A strange experience, picked up only because I was so in tune with my environment, and my physical and psychic senses were operating to the max. The mournful whoop of the spotted hyena echoes across the savannah, acting as a location call to other members of the pack. A lion kill is sighted, and immediately the frequency of the call changes to a come-together chorus. They gang up. The air is full of demonic maniacal laughter and cackles designed to unnerve and to intimidate the fretfully feeding lions. Eventually this cacophony becomes too much, and the pride run away, leaving the kill to the tender mercies of the hyenas. I have almost been deafened by this racket, and the effect is on the much more powerful hearing of lions can only be imagined. Now, zebra have a beautiful whooping call that is a feature of the African plains and is often heard at night as an alarm call. Bird calls fill the earth 24/7 and is one of the least understood yet most eagerly studied of all vocalizations. An eagle's cry is a vocalization of wilderness, and the nightingale's call is the sound of the English meadows. There are calls for territory, advertising, mating, aggression, and some say just for the sheer joy of calling and singing. I agree. Bees buzz in the key of E minor when they're in the hive, and then change the pitch to alert the others of a change. Flying in a figure 8, the depth of the curve shows the distance to flowers, and the longer parabolica of the figure shows the direction. pretty complicated stuff from an insect. The female glowworms here in the UK light up their abdomen with a chemical reaction that is not heat-based, chemical-based, and they anchor themselves on a stalk. It's called the bioluminescence. They anchor themselves on a stalk of grass or dead log. She lifts up her glowing rear end, as you can see, and waves it in a slow, sensuous dance to attract a male. A feature of the warm summer nights. Every year I do the glowworm study for my area. My job is to count the amount of males surrounding the female, how many females in a certain distance, etc., how far from habitation, street lights, so we get a more or less idea of our glowworm status here in the United Kingdom. Right, moving down into the ocean. One of the most beautiful, soul-wrenching sounds on this planet, in my opinion, is the song of the humpback whale. It fills the environment with sound, and if nature had to exult, this is what she would sound like. They use the natural land topography and undersea contours to channel this blast of song, rushing down like an aural flash flood. It travels thousands of miles across trackless blue seeking an answer. Before, there was no answer. So the whale deepened the song to gain more distance. Still no answer. The hoped-for partner was being butchered on a whale factory ship, a victim of our implacable greed. Often I've heard the same whalers would feel the vibration shudder through the ship as a harpoon struck, and the stentorian roar of agony would pass through the steel hull. Then the fleshy organs of the butchers then disperse across miles upon miles of ocean, the blue water being a silent witness to this murder. Enlightenment came eventually, and we stopped this mammalian genocide, and slowly the population crept back to almost normal. Correspondingly, we have noticed now the difference in pitch of whale songs to a higher register, as the notes don't need to travel as far to find a mate. Sound travels 4 times faster in water, and is a perfect medium for communication. Working as a dive master in southern Africa and in Mozambique, we often used to do what we call the deep blue dive. This is where we would go off the continental shelf, submerge, sink down to about 18 meters before we leveled off, and hovered in the deep blue world, where neither the surface or the bottom would be visible, hence the name Deep Blue. Always positioning ourselves in the known sound channel of the whale's bandwidth, we could hear the intercontinental calling and singing by Whale Song FM. I have heard this under a deep blue ocean, and believe me, the effect is profound. Their bass notes are so low that we only feel them as vibrations, yet they pass through our bodies. Somehow they affect the emotional stem of our brains, leading to sudden outbreaks of joy or tears of sorrow. Dolphins click and chatter with a family vocabulary. And once I took a pregnant woman down with me to dive amongst dolphins. She swears to this day that they filled her belly with comforting bass bumbles and frequencies that surely made her baby jump for sudden joy, and filled the mother with wonders and tears of amazement. I felt those bumbles myself as I was right next to her. The ocean is full of sound, wonder and joy, of creatures with hearts the size of family cars, with blood vessels we could walk through, like blue whales, singing, vocalizing and communication with brains many times the size of ours. Sink down into the black, sink down into the void and Stygian darkness where the water pressure can crush steel. Surely nothing can live. You sink deeper and deeper for thousands of meters before coming down to a sandy bottom. Through your powerful submarine spotlight, you notice the slowly crumbling Victorian splendor of the Titanic in the distance, looking like a forgotten cathedral of steel and broken dreams. It's deathly still. The deep ocean is a quiet place. Turning off your spotlight, the darkness is sudden and complete. But wait, slowly out of the black velvet, lights can be seen, flashing lights, coloured lights, strobe lights, lights beaming like searchlights before turning abruptly out. Lights running up and down, fins and tentacles like multicoloured silent fireworks. Lamps being dangled as bait, waiting in front of a tooth-filled mouth, as slowly your eyes and brain become besieged with a wondrous light show that no disco or rock concert in the world could compare. Yes, all this is down to communication. Lights, signalling, intention, emotion, territory and feelings. Light, as varied as complicated as our sounds, speeches and actions, all deep down here in the last frontier of Earth, an environment so hostile and extreme that only specially adapted creatures can exist, an alien landscape with unknown species still waiting to be discovered, yet all driven by that one inescapable need, a need so unique and fundamental that without it, life would not have flourished, it would have died out. A need so important to our mental well-being that to be deprived of it is torture. The need to communicate. Even trees communicate. They don't need sound. They need pheromones. Right, relevance to ourselves. If someone had to say to you, piss off, how does that make you feel? How does hearing make you feel? How do you react beyond exposure to just 7 letters of the alphabet, arranged in a certain way, calculated to cause offence? I love you dearly. Words that immediately conjure up image of our loved ones, of homes, and hearths. The central tenet of the Bible, and words we all love to hear or read, I love you dearly. The power of words can never be underestimated. They can destroy or heal, exalt or debase, enhance or degrade, and lastly make us laugh or cry. Plants communicate with each other using pheromones and seasons. They don't think per se, but research is proving something quite interesting. Russian scientists using an advanced form of Kirlian photography, which is an apparatus that captures on film the electrical force that all living things exude like an order, have imagined or imaged the force field of plants. On a mushroom kept in captivity, the field is small and ropey. On a wild specimen, the field is huge and butterfly-shaped. On a plant being approached by someone with water, the field increases to the other plants in the area, and they in turn give off their own blossoming field. When a plant is attacked or dug up, the field is suddenly and dramatically reduced, a system immediately shared by the other plants in the group, communication via force field. You put a bunch of people in a room chatting, communicating, then suddenly they all fall silent as if a wave has swept through the room, a wave of feeling that no one can identify. Force fields shrink and conversation dries up. Later it transpires that one couple were talking about a sudden death in the family. The spoken sentence finishes and an awkward silence envelops the two, and suddenly like a wildfire the same awkwardness descends on everybody, even though they didn't even hear what they were talking about. Communication via force field. Music is a communication of the soul. The effects are sudden and dramatic, determining your mood, your emotional state and your actions regarding. As a musician myself, certain notes arranged in a certain way, like words, can have a huge effect on the state of the person whose ears they enter. Get to marry this with the crowd animal discussed earlier, and the possibilities of behavior and mind control are endless. Backward masking, which was using subliminal messages that were only audible when a song was played backward, yet picked up by the subconscious mind, was used by certain unscrupulous artists, both as a gimmick and as an experiment in behavior control. Supermarkets use the same, with songs through speakers, telling people to buy without them being aware of it. Shelves were arranged in a certain way that appealed to the subconscious mind to buy the product even though it was not needed. A few high-profile court cases have been the result of these attempts of controlling our minds using popular forms of communication. We need to be constantly aware now, when the world has shrunk to the size of an iPad or a smartphone. It is disturbing to see people not talking, not communicating, not using their tongues or vocal cords, yet tapping furiously away on their smartphones instead. Catch any train or bus and you will know what I mean. I mean, if you go to Japan, you go to the pachinko parlor, right, and it's just like one big blast of noise. And a pachinko is like a form of pinball. I mean, last week I was alone with my dog in the woods. The air was full with the sound of squirrels fighting over the winter nut storage. Robins staccatoed like red waistcoated auctioneers, and woodpeckers heckling them from the sidelines. In effect, the wood was full of sound of nature in overdrive, gearing up for the long cold months ahead. Suddenly a human figure came around the corner, music blaring into his brain from headphones, staring with gnomic isolation into a tiny glowing smartphone, and totally oblivious to the dance of life around him, as his fingers danced the rhythm of enslavement on the keyboard. So involved was this apparition that he didn't even see or notice me directly in his path. So in his last minute, his force field, which must have been tiny, collided with mine, and he swerved away at the last moment when he noticed me. I got out of his way and was ready to give this guy a nature lesson and say, "Listen, dude, what are you doing?" But he just issued a mumbling apology and went careering off, lost in his own world. Now, we can understand in the rush of a city, but in the middle of the woods? We are fast losing our most profound and precious gift, and that is ability and pleasure to communicate with each other on a molecular and physical level, using our body language, which is amazing, our voices that can change the way we feel, and a life force that is unconsciously influences everyone around us. We are being replaced by a ghastly piece of intelligent plastic that is robbing us of what makes it great to be human. I mean, I've often watched with the warm glow the enthusiasm of animals when they greet and interact with each other, and I've noticed with a deep sense of unease a silent bunch of people in a railway carriage or a family in a restaurant with not a word being said between them, all staring down into a void of technology. I mean, don't get me wrong, cell phones are amazing. They capture crimes, make families closer, and generally make us safer. Internet is simply quite incredible. I mean, with Facebook I can be in touch with people I was at school with. This whole course is on the internet that we're doing right now. I mean, it has really brought us closer together. But it's when these amazing tools take away our will to interact, react, and most importantly communicate with each other on a molecular and oral physical level that they become simply dangerous. Legendary Lotharios like Valentina and Warren Beatty were able to charm a woman and make her feel special with some well-chosen words infused with feeling, and she in turn could cut a man down to his shoe size with a few other well-chosen words also infused with feeling. Nowadays, meet a girl at a bus stop on a train and you are faced with the impenetrable barrier of the MP3 player as the first offence, with some smartphone or iPad as the second offence, and the totally closed body language and dead face as the last yet most effective defense against the communication, or the awkwardness of speaking or meeting a new person. No awkwardness soon turning into pleasure of just being able to communicate. I cannot stress this enough. It is the essence of what makes us human, what makes us tick as a species. What determines the right gene flow in a society is under threat, mostly being created by ourselves with our mindless embracing of technology. Talking about gene flu, people meet online, not in person. And online you can't really have the body language, you can't really get the force field of that person until you meet them in a public place, and it's either it's yay or nay. I mean, don't get me wrong, it works for single people. I'm not bashing this completely for meeting people. I mean, it's just when it can lead to total reliance on it. You don't want to go out, you don't want to meet people, it's too awkward for you. With people with problems, fair enough, I mean that is, and the internet can be a really a good place where you can interact with people, especially if you've got agoraphobia or something like that. So I'm talking generally, I'm talking about the population as a whole. I mean, people sitting in their flats on their own all the time. I mean, this can only once again lead to loneliness, social problems, and antisocial behaviour, and most disturbingly, our lack of social cohesion, with this automatic empathy for each other. And I've seen in society today the empathy is gone. It's going. You base your life in technology. Your empathy towards other people and other human beings is gonna go. I've seen it now. I've seen it. People getting more rude. They're getting more impatient. This kind of this social magnetism is just gone, and it's like almost like a passive aggressiveness towards everybody, towards each other. And I think technology has a large part to play for that. Okay, lastly on this lecture, here is a picture of a Zen monk photographed by myself in Yokohama, Japan, isolated from the bustling rush of the modern world, totally encapsulated in a spiritual domain that is both accessible and remote, everyday yet far away, real yet unreal, but most importantly being used in an attitude of prayer to help us to understand, to get along, to live in peace, and most importantly and profoundly, to keep talking. Okay, that completes the last lecture of Module 2, the need to communicate. And after this we're going to go on to Module 3. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you on the ice. Bye for now.